Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
They say Roswell was the beginning, but what if another crash, half a world away, was far more extraordinary and then buried so completely that almost no one remembers it happened? In May 1989, deep in the burning silence of the Kalahari Desert, something was said to have fallen from the sky. Military radars locked onto it. Fighter jets were scrambled, and within hours, an operation shrouded in secrecy had begun. An operation that, according to leaked intelligence, involved not only the South African Air Force, but also the United States. The story would vanish almost as quickly as it appeared. This is the story of the UFO crash that the US tried to erase from history. Let's take a look at the Kalahari incident. The Kalahari incident. Date, location, and initial claim. On 7th May 1989, a highly unusual aerial object entered the airspace of South Africa and subsequently crashed in the Kalahari Desert region near the South Africa-Botswana border. Some versions of the story instead give the date as 1988, but the predominant claim across UFO literature places it on 7th May 1989. The location is described as the Central Kalahari Desert region, approximately 80 kilometers north of the South African border with Botswana. One document claims a crater approximately 150 meters in diameter and 12 meters deep at the impact site in the Kalahari terrain, with the object partially embedded in the sandy or rocky ground. This was the vast Kalahari Basin of southern Africa, covering parts of Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. The initial claim garnered public attention in the early 1990s, primarily through specialized UFO publications.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
The UK magazine Quest International devoted a special edition to the incident in 1993. In South Africa, the periodical UFO Afro-News published reports and commentary on the crash on the Botswana-South Africa border region. The story was widely circulated in UFO enthusiast circles under the headline of a crash retrieval event, likening it to the more widely known Roswell incident in the United States. The claim being that this Kalahari event was South Africa's Roswell. So, what actually happened? Well, we'll unveil the whole truth today. On 7th of May 1989, a naval frigate of the South African Navy first detected an unidentified flying object, or UFO, on radar at approximately 1345 GMT as the object reportedly approached the African southwest coast and headed toward the continent from a northwesterly direction. The object, according to the dossier circulated among UFO searchers, entered South African airspace at 1352 GMT, at which point the South African Air Force, or SAAF, allegedly scrambled two Dassault Mirage 3 jets from a base referred to in the documents as Valhalla Air Force Base. At 1359 GMT, the pilot of one of the intercepting aircraft reportedly achieved radar and visual contact with the object, and the orders were allegedly given to arm and engage the object using an experimental weapons system referenced in the documents as the Thor 2 laser cannon. After the laser weapon was fired, several intense flashes were seen emanating from the object. The object's altitude then reportedly began dropping at a rate of around 3,000 feet per minute, and at approximately 1402 GMT, it is claimed to have dived at a 25-degree angle and impacted the surface of the desert some 80 kilometers north of the South Africa-Botswana border, in the central part of the Kalahari Desert. The crash created a crater roughly 150 meters in diameter and around 12 meters deep, and the craft, described as a disc-shaped metallic object, was said to be embedded at a 45-degree angle in the crater's wall, with surrounding sand and rock fused by intense heat. The object was described in the text as silver-colored, flawless in outer surface finish, approximately 20 yards, or 18 meters in length, and weighing about 50,000 kilograms. Following the impact, a retrieval team composed of Air Force intelligence officers, technical staff, and medical personnel was deployed into the area. Electronic equipment on site is said to have failed due to a strong magnetic and radioactive field surrounding the craft. It is claimed that the craft was secured and transported to a secret underground facility, referred to as Level 6 of Air Force Base, where it was examined using hydraulic equipment to open the hull. Inside the craft, 2 humanoid entities were recovered alive. The beings were described as 4 to 4.5 feet or 1.2 to 1.4 meters tall, grayish-blue skin, oversized heads, large slanted eyes, 3-toed webbed feet, and no visible external genital organs. One of the beings allegedly attacked an attending doctor, leaving deep scratch marks, and the report specifies that both entities were later transferred to the United States, specifically to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, on 23rd of June, 1989. The aircraft, possibly a C-5, carrying the beings, is said to have been moved out of South Africa on that date and flown to Wright-Patterson for further research. The document cites a code name for the operation as Project Black Horse. The story's level of detail is striking. The precise times of radar contact, the speed attributed to the object during its approach, the size and shape of the craft, and the dimensions of the crater all contribute to a richly detailed narrative. During the crash retrieval, 2 South African helicopters are also said to have crashed due to the strong electromagnetic field around the object, and all crew members perished. The alleged operation is presented in the documents as a high-security collaboration between South African and US military intelligence agencies. The craft was stabilized in South Africa, then exported to the US under a bilateral agreement said to involve advanced weapons in exchange for access to the craft and its occupants. The story is eerily similar to earlier UFO crash retrieval narratives, such as the 1947 Roswell incident case. We may never have known any of this. It was only by chance that the information was revealed. Leaked top-secret documents. In 1993, a collection of classified papers began circulating among UFO research circles, quickly gaining international attention under the name the Kalahari Files. These documents detailed a South African military operation that had taken place 4 years earlier, in May 1989, when an unidentified flying object was supposedly detected by radar, pursued by jet interceptors, and brought down in the Kalahari Desert near the South Africa-Botswana border. The files, presented as top secret, appeared first within small UFO researcher networks before being published in specialized magazines, such as Quest International in the United Kingdom, and later discussed at conferences dedicated to unexplained aerial phenomena. The emergence of these documents coincided with a surge in post-Cold War interest in alleged UFO cover-ups. Their release came only a few years after the end of apartheid, when South Africa's military institutions were still transitioning and reorganizing, creating fertile ground for speculation about hidden archives and covert foreign collaboration. The Kalahari Files contained a series of typed pages describing radar tracking data, orders for interception flights by Dassault, Mirage 3 aircraft, the use of a classified laser weapons system referred to as Thor 2, and the recovery of a metallic disc embedded in the desert. The text outlined times, locations, and even atmospheric conditions, offering an unusual level of technical specificity for such a claim. However, almost immediately after their publication, discrepancies began to surface. Analysts noted that the entire document set had been written in English, even though, at the time, official South African Air Force communications, especially those classified at high security levels, were typically drafted in Afrikaans, the administrative and military language of the apartheid-era state. This linguistic inconsistency became one of the first red flags cited by skeptics. Additional scrutiny revealed that several of the air bases and officer names listed in the files could not be matched to any known entries in SAAF personnel or infrastructure records from 1989. No installation named Valhalla Air Force Base, for example, has ever been identified in South African Defence Archives. Prominent British researcher Anthony Dodd, a retired police officer and member of the Yorkshire UFO Society, was among the first to receive and distribute the documents publicly. Dodd, who became known for his work on military UFO encounter claims, presented the material as a genuine leak from within South African intelligence circles. In South Africa itself, Johan Pretorius, an independent journalist and researcher, began pursuing leads connected to the alleged crash site. Pretorius reportedly attempted to locate the crater described in the documents, said to be roughly 150 meters in diameter and 12 meters deep, but geological surveys of the Kalahari region failed to reveal any corresponding formation. No verifiable radar logs, flight records, or incident reports have ever been produced to substantiate the claim of an aerial interception on the 7th of May, 1989. Likewise, no satellite or reconnaissance imagery from that period has shown any indication of an impact site in the area specified. The alleged craft, described as disc-shaped and metallic, weighing around 50 metric tons, has never been corroborated by any physical fragment, recovered debris, or material evidence. Both the South African Air Force and the United States Air Force have formally denied any knowledge of such an event, and no supporting documentation has surfaced through official channels, press archives, or declassification requests. Further examination by document analysts in the late 1990s uncovered numerous procedural and formatting anomalies. The style of the letterheads, classification markings, and date stamps did not correspond to the official templates used in South African government paperwork of the late 1980s. Ranks and abbreviations were inconsistent with standard SAF nomenclature, and certain military designations, such as Thor II laser cannon, had no trace in South African or NATO weapons development records. Researchers also found that the page layout, font, and typing format were identical to those used in UFO newsletters and amateur research correspondence from the early 1990s, suggesting the documents were produced using civilian equipment rather than government typewriters. By the early 2000s, most professional and academic UFO investigators had concluded that the Kalahari files were likely fabrications. Organizations such as the Mutual UFO Network catalogued the case but classified it as unverified due to the complete absence of corroborative evidence. Even sympathetic investigators noted that the level of technical detail, such as exact times, altitudes, and internal medical descriptions of alleged extraterrestrial beings, did not align with genuine military reporting. South African geologists consulted by the Pretoria News in 2001 confirmed that no heat-fused crater or magnetic anomaly had been detected in the relevant region. Despite the lack of verifiable material, the Kalahari narrative refused to fade. The story spread rapidly across early internet forums and UFO bulletin boards throughout the 1990s and 2000s, often cited alongside the 1947 Roswell incident in New Mexico and the 1965 Kecksburg case in Pennsylvania as examples of government secrecy surrounding crashed objects. The idea of a joint US-South African recovery operation played into post-Cold War anxieties about covert technological exchange and hidden alliances between Western military powers. Even without evidence, the alleged Project Black Horse, mentioned in the leaked papers as a code name for the retrieval, became a recurring term in conspiracy discussions. Cultural fascination continued into the streaming era. The story has inspired multiple documentaries. Academic treatment of the case has largely framed it as an example of modern myth-making rather than evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Cultural historians studying UFO folklore have cited the Kalahari files as a textbook illustration of how pseudo-official documentation can lend credibility to otherwise unsupported stories. The document's tone mirrored classified formats closely enough to convince portions of the public, even though factual verification was absent. Such features allowed the Kalahari narrative to persist, but one can't deny that governments have been quite silent about UFOs in general. That was until recently, when they began opening up. UFO encounters acknowledged as real phenomena. Historically, governments treated reports of flying saucers and alien crash sites as embarrassments to be quietly dispelled. During the Cold War, many Air Force encounters with unexplained objects were logged but kept classified or dismissed as weather balloons, instrumentation errors, or misidentification. The United States Project Blue Book, active from 1952 to 1969, concluded that nothing posed a threat to national security and no evidence existed of extraterrestrial craft. The entire matter was then effectively shelved. In more recent years, however, the shift has become palpable. In April 2020, the United States Department of Defense officially acknowledged that 3 previously leaked videos showing U.S. Navy encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena were authentic. These videos, featuring objects maneuvering in ways that did not correspond to known aircraft, were first made public by the New York Times in 2017 and finally declassified by the Pentagon in 2020. From that moment, the tide turned. UAPs could no longer be dismissed out of hand as merely myth or hoax. They had entered the official ledger. In June 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence published its Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomena report, mandated by Congress, which stated that between November 2004 and March 2021, there were 144 UAP reports from government sources, of which only one could be explained with high confidence. While the report emphasized that no clear indications pointed to extraterrestrial origin, it also affirmed that many incidents involved objects observed across multiple sensors. The message had changed. Yes, something unexplained is happening, and yes, it warrants investigation. By early 2023, the numbers had ballooned. Over 366 new cases were added since March 2021, bringing the public tally to 510 UAP reports. In late 2024, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, created in July 2022 and inheriting work from earlier task forces, reported receiving 757 UAP reports in a year, of which 118 were resolved as mundane phenomena, leaving hundreds still unresolved. This shift reveals that governments are no longer denying the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena. They are documenting them, filing them, and reporting on their status. What this means for narratives like the Kalahari incident is twofold. On one hand, the aura of secrecy that once made such stories compelling is somewhat eroded. Official acknowledgement of the phenomenon means that the need for conspiratorial documents or dramatic crash retrievals is lessened. On the other hand, the official recognition that UAPs exist, even if they are not proven alien vehicles, lends credibility to the idea that something unconventional may be happening, and thus perpetuates belief in more extreme claims. Governments are saying, yes, these things are worth tracking, even if they're not saying, yes, these things are alien vehicles. That distinction is important, and it preserves the engine of belief that undergirds incidents like Kalahari. With governments expanding their capacities, such as better sensors, formal reporting pipelines, and dedicated offices, the narrative of unexplained phenomena no longer dwells entirely in the fringe. For example, the US Navy now requires pilots to report UAP encounters officially.
Are legitimate images of UFOs taken by Navy personnel.
Multiple sensors confirm that in at least 80 of the 144 cases cited in the 2021 report, the object was tracked by more than one instrument. Yet the difference between official acknowledgement and myth remains sharp. AARO's 2024 report stated outright that it found no evidence that any UAP sighting represented extraterrestrial technology, and that claims of the government possessing reverse-engineered alien craft are inaccurate. Thus, while the government is admitting the phenomenon, it also insists that the extraordinary claims remain unsupported. That mirrors the Kalahari story's central weakness: depth of claim paired with absence of verifiable evidence. This duality explains why the Kalahari narrative persists now, perhaps more than ever. It occupies the space between official recognition and empirical proof. Governments are saying, in effect, yes, we track strange things in the sky. They are not saying, yes, these were alien craft, and so narratives that claim exactly the latter retain cultural purchase precisely because there is still no official resolution. The Kalahari story benefits from this gap. Moreover, the broader cultural shift in how UFOs are discussed has changed the tone. Whereas earlier the topic was derided as fringe, today it appears in congressional hearings, defense budgets, and major news outlets. The press coverage of the Pentagon and ODNI reports has brought mainstream attention to what was once dismissed as tabloid territory. The fact that governments set up entities like AARO and publish annual summaries of UAPS signals that the phenomenon is now part of national security discourse rather than merely the domain of amateur researchers. This institutional legitimization gives weight to the idea that we don't know everything about the sky, and by extension to stories like Kalahari that say something dramatic did happen and might still be hidden. However, the mainstream shift also sets new standards of evidence. Governments now require multiple sensor confirmation, data sharing, standardized incident reporting, and rigorous analysis. The Kalahari narrative, which hinges on a leaked document set rather than peer-reviewed data or official logs, appears weaker under these standards. Analysts of the Kalahari files pointed out linguistic and procedural inconsistencies, non-existent base names and officers, and a lack of physical evidence. By contrast, modern UAP reports are built on aircraft instrumentation, official pilot debriefs, radar infrared fusion data, and public disclosures. So, as governments begin to take UAPS seriously, the space for myth remains open and indeed may expand. Because what remains unexplained is still vast, the cultural need for dramatic narratives persists. For believers in crash retrieval and alien craft, the fact that governments do not categorically dismiss UAPS can strengthen the belief that something hidden is being suppressed. For skeptics, the same official stance emphasizes the gulf between acknowledgement and evidence. The Kalahari narrative persists because it sits at a juncture between acknowledgement and proof. Governments now say, "We're investigating," but they also say, "We don't have all the answers." For those who believe there was a crash in the Kalahari and governments covered it up, the lack of definitive proof is not an obstacle, it's validation, and that's progress. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.